In her book, A Great Calm, Janet Denison discusses 3 a.m. moments, those times your mind races or you receive a call you never wanted to get. When the storms of life rage, where do you turn? Please be encouraged by Janet's devotional and request your copy of A Great Calm today at thedailyarticle.org. Today is Thursday, February the 22nd, 2024, and this is the Daily Article Podcast. I'm Chris Elkins, narrating today's Daily Article, written by Denison Forum co-founder and CEO, Dr. Jim Denison. The Supreme Court of Alabama ruled this week that the state's Wrongful Death of a Minor Act applies to frozen embryos. This decision classifies embryos created through in vitro fertilization as unborn children and thus human lives, including those who were created in laboratories and then frozen. In response, a large Alabama hospital paused in vitro fertilization treatments yesterday as healthcare providers weigh the impact of the ruling. If embryos are to be legally classified as human beings, a position known as fetal personhood, the implication would be seismic across our society. Abortions would be the ending of human life and thus illegal in principle. Embryos could no longer be destroyed, donated for research, or even stored except for future implementation in their mother. Unborn children would presumably qualify as persons under the 14th Amendment's provision that, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside, end quote. This would grant unborn children all the other rights and privileges accorded to U.S. citizens. It is obviously too soon to know the full consequences of this ruling for the people of Alabama or whether it will impact other states, but it does raise questions that are relevant for those of us who believe life is sacred from conception. How should we view embryos outside the womb? Should they also be considered human and thus sacred? Should couples struggling with infertility turn to in vitro fertilization? If so, with what guidelines? Since this is a very large and complex issue, I have written a white paper for our website that examines these and other questions in some depth. A link to it can be found in today's episode notes. The paper originated with work I have done over the years as resident scholar for ethics with a major not-for-profit healthcare system. I'll summarize the paper as it relates to the foundational issues before us today. Does life begin when the sperm fertilizes the egg or when the fertilized egg is implanted in the mother's womb? This position that life begins at implementation would view an embryo created through in vitro fertilization as a zygote rather than a person, with these consequences. It could be frozen for possible use in the future. A large number of zygotes could be created in the lab and then subjected to testing known as pre-implantation genetic diagnosis to determine which are most viable before implantation, with others frozen or discarded. It could be used ethically to harvest stem cells and for other research and pharmaceutical purposes. The position that life begins at fertilization views an embryo created through in vitro fertilization as a human, the position taken by the Alabama Supreme Court. It would mean an embryo created through in vitro fertilization must not be the subject of experiments, stem cell harvesting, or any other procedure we would not ethically conduct on another human. In vitro fertilization could be used only to create embryos for implantation and would not subject them to pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. For reasons I explain in detail in my website paper, I agree with the large number of embryologists and ethicists who believe life begins at fertilization. Accordingly, I believe that the Alabama Supreme Court made the right decision from an ethical perspective, and I support the conclusions noted above regarding the value and status of embryos created through in vitro fertilization. What does today's conversation say to those of us who are not making in vitro fertilization decisions or affected directly by them? At the very least, we are reminded that each of us, however we were conceived, is fearfully and wonderfully made by our Maker, as stated in Psalm 139, verse 14. To this end, let's close with these reflections by the 4th century's St. Gregory of Nazianzus. Quote, "Recognize to whom you owe the fact that you exist, that you breathe, that you understand, that you are wise, and, above all, that you know God and hope for the kingdom of heaven and the vision of glory, now darkly as in a mirror, but then with greater fullness and purity. You have been made a son of God, co-heir with Christ." Where did you get all of this? And from whom? Let me turn to what is of less importance, the visible world around us. What benefactor enabled you to look out upon the beauty of the sky, the sun in its course, the circle of the moon, the countless number of stars, with the harmony and order that are theirs, like the music of a harp? Who has blessed you with rain, with the art of husbandry, with different kinds of food, with the arts, with houses, with laws, with states, with a life of humanity and culture, with friendship and easy familiarity of kinship? St. Gregory concludes, "Brethren and friends, let us never allow ourselves to misuse what has been given us by God's gift." End quote. St. Gregory is right. God views your life as His providential, gracious, and unique gift. How will this fact change your day? Thank you for listening to today's Daily Article podcast. If you would also like to read the Daily Article with its citations and references linked to their sources, find links in the episode notes to read today's article and to subscribe to the Daily Article email newsletter.